Bowden?
Your worship, we're all set on the live.
Thank you. If I could get council to come on screen. Thank you. And there we go. Technically 5:59. I'll give it a few more seconds. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Committee of the Whole. This one focused on the official plan for this Monday, February the 22nd. We had no closed session today, so we begin the open session. We call to order at 6 o'clock. Okay. First on the agenda would be the adoption of the agenda. Okay. Council, are there any edits or amendments to this agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion, please? Deputy and Councillor Townend, any comment? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Thank you. Motion is carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none, we move forward into staff reports. First up, item 4.1 is the Amherst West Secondary Plan. A presentation. I believe either Ms. Merritt or Mr. Winicky, are you introducing this one?
Yes, Your Worship, if with your permission.
Go ahead.
I'd like to introduce Nadia DeSanti. She's the Senior Project Manager for WSP, which is the consulting firm retained for the purposes of producing our secondary plan. Nadia has a master's degree in regional planning from Queen's University, as well as a Bachelor of Arts degree from Laurentian University, and is a registered professional planner. She has 20 years of professional planning experience, including working and leading the development of secondary plans in other municipalities. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Nadia.
Thank you, Bowden, and good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. Pleasure to be here in front of you tonight, and thanks for the introduction. So I have a very short presentation, and I'm hoping, do I share my screen or is that, yes, okay.
Yeah, sorry, you can share your screen.
Okay, one moment. Sorry, I should have confirmed that. One moment, sorry. Okay, can you see that okay?
I can, yep.
Yes, okay, great, thank you. So thank you again for the opportunity to work with the township and the community. We're very excited to be working on this integrated secondary plan and environmental assessment process. So basically, tonight's presentation is just to give a very quick overview of the project and the timelines. Well, and also introduce the project team. You just have me tonight, but there is a whole host of us behind this work. The quick overview of the work plan, as I mentioned, opportunities for community engagement and next steps. So So the purpose of the secondary plan is, if you will, it's another plan that's layered under the official plan, and it's a planning tool used to kind of get into the area a little bit more with more detail and more analysis. And with the pressure that is being expended in the area due to other factors and the growth that is likely going to be coming for the next 25 years. The secondary plan will look at that, and it will look at a variety of land uses. It will also look at housing options, looking at parks and any kind of facilities that are needed, protection of the natural environment, as well as, the network, both from a roads perspective, but also from an active transportation need. So cycling pathways and that connectivity to the external network. As I mentioned, while the secondary plan is legislated under the Planning Act, we're doing an integrated process that includes the Municipal Class Environmental Assessment, or MCEA is the acronym. And that is the process for related infrastructure improvements. And I'll get into that a little bit further. So the secondary plan study area is in the western part of Amherst View. And we have Taylor Kidd Boulevard to the north, and then it's bound by County Road 6, Bath Road on the south, and on the west here. Oh, sorry, I have my live screen little banner right in the middle of my view. So basically, this is the secondary plan area outlined in blue, and it's also the area for the environmental assessment process. So when you see study area, you know that it's this area west of the existing community. So I am the project manager for both of the secondary plan and the environmental assessment project, and Anita Sod is the assistant project manager. We have a whole team. James Jarrett will be doing the quality assurance and quality control, and Manon Belil will be our strategic advisor. And Manon joins WSP from the town of Hawkesbury, where she spent 25 plus years as a municipal planner. So she'll have a very municipal lens to our project, but as a consultant. So she's very excited to be part of this team. And then we have various disciplines, including going left to right, natural heritage, so natural environment, cultural heritage, archaeology. We have a climate change lead, municipal engineering, pretty much every every discipline, including geotechnical, hydrogeology. My colleague, Megan McMillan, who is a planner, but will be leading the environmental assessment process. So there will be quite a number of studies that will be done and that will feed into the process. This is a key image that we like to use to show at the top the secondary plan process, and at the bottom are the municipal class environmental assessment process and timelines. The integrated planning and EA approach means that both processes move together, and any community engagement events notices will meet the requirements of both the Planning Act and the Environmental Assessment Act. So just moving from left to right, phase 1 is the phase that we're in now. We are going to be starting some field work, hopefully next week. We're going to be reviewing background documents, and we'll be having an online workshop and a survey, and the notice of study commencement, so that's a term under the EA process, will advise that we're starting the EA process. So that's how phase 1 will work. Moving into phase 2 is a public engagement program. So that's the strip that goes across, as you see. But phase 3 is really when we're going to be coming up with some land use concept plans. We'll have a committee meeting. We're going to have public open house. And we're going to be looking at, from the EA perspective, the problems, opportunities, and some evaluations. So could include different road patterns, could include, servicing, options to be able to implement the preferred land use concept plan options. So it's an iterative process. And again, there's public engagement throughout every phase of the project. So we're hoping to do that and conclude that phase at the end of the summer. Phase 4 would then be sort of the last part of the year, so from August to December 2021. And the end product, if you will, of this project will be a secondary plan. It will also require an official plan amendment to implement that secondary plan. And we'll also have a zoning bylaw amendment, or ZBLA. So at the end of the planning process, there should be a secondary plan, a policy document implemented through an official plan amendment, and a zoning bylaw amendment to have those lands zoned in accordance with what the secondary plan shows. We're also going to have some urban design standards that will refer to items for consideration when future development occurs on the land. So it will be a full, complete package that will really highlight the vision, the land uses, the look and feel, the connectivity, the areas that will be protected for this new community. Through phases 4 and 5 at the bottom, we'll also have the preferred solution from a servicing perspective, and also cost estimates from a Schedule C perspective. So that is sort of moving towards the final phase, which really would be January to April of next year. And that phase will conclude with hopefully council adoption of the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment. And then there's an appeal process. And then from the environmental assessment perspective, we would complete the preferred design for the environmental assessment, complete the servicing master plan, and there's also a 30-day public review period of that master plan that will be posted on the Environmental Bill of Registry. So we're looking at, about a 15-month planning and EA process with various checkpoints and community input opportunities along the way. So in terms of the community engagement, we are going to be working on a public engagement program strategy, and that actually will be forthcoming to Bowdoin very soon. We like to have a project branding, so some kind of a logo, not to take away from the township's logo, but a project branding, so a logo that represents the project that people can identify with, and then that can be used on communication material, digital format. If we were printing, it would obviously be unprinted information, and it would be included on the township's project webpage, any kind of social media, little bursts, with the logo. It's a recognition that people can be proud of and kind of relate to. We can't forget our newspaper notifications. So we would have notices in the Kingston Whig, the Napanee Beaver. One of the things that we ensure we do is to create accessible and age-friendly engagement materials. So looking at even the fonts that we use, making sure there's visual, making sure there's plain language, even, the colors of fonts on backgrounds, all those things sort of help to ensure that we are meeting accessibility and age-friendly requirements. And as viewed on the previous slide, we are having some very key opportunities for public input, including a visioning workshop. There'll be public open houses, statutory public meetings that are required under the Planning Act and the EA Act. We will also be outreaching to the Indigenous communities and ensuring that they are informed of the project. We will ask them how they want to be involved. Are there any items that or topics that they would like to discuss. So we will be starting that as well, and that will be outlined in our public engagement program strategy. And there will be definitely coordination with the coordination committee and the technical advisory committee. They will be reviewing the draft documents before they are released to the public, providing that technical expertise, that local expertise, some information perhaps that is being researched or being worked on. And so those committees are extremely important. We like using committees on these types of projects because it really provides that check and balance, and also provides that a fulsome package of information and ideas and comments. So lots of opportunities for being engaged. The project webpage will have a frequently asked questions section, FAQs. It has some now, and it will be populated as we move forward, and updated as we need to throughout the process. And that will be sort of common questions that people will ask, that people can go to. Bowden was the township contact for this project, and people can join and send emails to him and join a email list to be kept informed of this project as well. In terms of next steps, as I mentioned, we're hoping to mobilize our team next week to start some staking on the ground, some getting the locates and start some borehole testing, and there will be additional field work from the environmental side as the snow disappears. So there will be some spring work for sure and some summer work. So while some of that field work is happening, we will be reviewing the background studies, preparing a background analysis report, which would be available in April. That will feed into the online visioning workshop and community survey. That feedback will help to prepare and develop some land use concept options over the summer months, June, July. We're proposing a public open house in July to get feedback on the land use concepts. And then we'd like to come back to council in August to present the preferred land use concept plan, because once that is agreed upon, then we can move forward with preparing the draft secondary plan and ensuring that that secondary plan is reflecting the land use concept plan. We are assuming that the engagement is virtual at this point. We've had a lot of success with online engagement on our projects, on surveys, using different formats. So, you know, I think it does offer more opportunity in one way, because people can view the material on their own time, you know, rather than here's one 4-hour meeting in an evening. So there is some positive outcomes of this pandemic. And we're really excited to you know, be part of this process and really work with the community and with staff to come up with a great plan for the area, and considering the needs from the township's perspective, the community, and also bring some of our, you know, lessons learned and opportunities for growth and development for this area, and really be working. I always say we are working together. We're here just to help facilitate the process and bring our best practice and knowledge too, but it's always exciting as a planner to hear and learn about the communities that we work in. So we're very excited, and I'm happy to answer any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. DeSanti. And Ms. DeSanti, Council, do we have any questions with regard to the presentation? I'll go with Councillor Porter, then Councillor Gordon.
Yes, thank you, Ms. DeSanti. I'm just wondering if part of the background studies, is that including a land needs assessment?
So, and I will, through you, Your Worship, I will also ask Bowden to comment as needed, but we are aware that Hamilton Consulting prepared a population, housing, and employment projections document. So we know what the projections are from a residential housing units and jobs. We also have received sort of the plans of subdivision, both vacant that have been registered, draft plan approvals. So we'll be looking at that and assessing, you know, how much land is needed. And I know the township is doing their official plan review. So there's likely some information through that process that we can also use to look at what are the land needs to meet those growth projections.
Support, is that answer?
Yes, so in essence, no, an assessment, land needs assessment has not been done or not included in the scope of the work then.
Bowden, if you can maybe confirm what has been done maybe through the official plan.
So yes, so this area is designated for future development in the official plan. It has been sort of on the books to do for a number of years. I've heard the number 13 thrown out. So, but in terms of an actual land needs assessment, that sort of document has not been done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon, you had a question?
Yeah, concerning the farm property on the corner of that area where County Road 6 and Bath meet, because we're all aware the current landowners are adamant that's never going to be anything other than a farm. So I guess my question is, as we're including it, has there been some movement on that I'm not aware of, or some change, or how do we go about planning for that if say the second generation of that farm decides they don't want to cooperate or sell the land?
So that's a good question. We are currently also assembling all the ownership for lands in this area. Township is a large landowner in this secondary plan area, and we will be reaching out to everyone to gauge their interest in being actively involved in this project, but also to confirm that they do see a future in the secondary plan.
Okay. Curious. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Porter, go ahead.
This is more of a question for staff about the presentation or about the information. The land needs, sorry, not the land needs assessment, but the secondary plan, there's many other fringe areas in our municipality. And I'm just wondering if the secondary plan for this particular area will take into consideration the other fringe areas are available and address you know, what can be done in this particular area with consideration to all the other fringe areas that exist.
It's a good question. Yes, we will be looking at those other areas in Odessa as well as in Bath. They are at a different stage than this particular piece of property, but we will obviously take a closer look at the timing for those as well and what the sort of challenges are in those areas going forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, seeing none. So thank you, Ms. DeSanti. I appreciate the presentation and excited to see this getting going.
Thank you very much, Your Worship and Council, and have a good rest of the meeting.
Thank you.
We'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye-bye. Okay, Council, can I get a motion to receive that presentation? Oh, sorry, Councilor Porter. My screen just kind of bounced around. And so moved by Councillor Porter. Do I have a seconder? I can't see all the hands. Councillor Townend, thank you. And any questions or comments? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Motion is carried. Mr. Winicky, if I could get you to stop sharing the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I'm still showing WSP. Sorry.
Thank you. I think you were both sharing it simultaneously and that deferred it back to you. That's fine. Okay, so with that, we move on to item 4.2, the official plan review and the status review. Mr. Winicky or Ms. Merritt, I'm not sure who's taking the lead on this. Ms. Merritt?
Well, I'll do the presentation. Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick introduction, not the presentation. Whew. So we're very much looking forward to getting the official plan approved so that we can move forward with the preparation and approval of the secondary plan. As we just heard, it's really exciting. The comprehensive zoning bylaw review, community improvement plans to attract industries and foster the redevelopment of brownfields in Loyalist Township. So the draft official plan that was presented on December 15th had gone through a full public process as well as circulation to agencies and interested parties. It is important to note that major changes, as some proposed amendments passed on December 15th, would require a restart of this public process, like recirculating the new draft OP or the amended OP to all agencies and hold another statutory public meeting, the appropriate commenting and analysis period. So to explain the impact of the requested amendments, our planners, Mr. Winicky and Ms. Furness, have prepared a presentation to facilitate the interpretation of the staff report. So without further ado, I will pass the stage to Bowden and Andrea.
Thank you, Mr. Winicky, and I don't see Ms. Furness yet. There she is. Welcome, and go ahead.
Is this showing up on your screen by any chance?
At this point, we are not seeing a shared screen.
Okay, let me try that again.
Looks like it's starting. Okay, that works.
It's there? Good. All right. Let me just move it over on my other screen here.
If I may say something, okay, thank you, Bowden. It's easier to see the whole screen. Okay.
All right. Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. This evening is entirely devoted to planning matters. We've just had a briefing from Nadia on the exciting work that's begun on the Amherst View West secondary plan, and now the main course, a discussion on the draft OP. So the purpose of today's meeting is to present public comments from the December 15th statutory public meeting, further amendments to the plan that were passed by council and correspondence received to date for council's consideration. To provide a planning analysis of the proposed amendments that were last included in the final official plan for council, as directed by the council resolution, as well as to bring forward analysis on the additional requests of council referenced in the resolution passed that evening. This is the resolution that was passed that evening. It's actually in 5 parts. The first is the amendments that were introduced, and there are 36 of those. And then the second part is a report on the rules of consent, followed by a report on the definition of residential units and options to address the disparity between large units and small units, and whether it be by ratio or by square feet, by number of occupants, etc. Third report, a list of official plan amendment requests and minor variance requests made in the last 2 to 3 years, or 5 if possible. And finally, the comments received from council and the public that were not addressed by the request for reports or an amendment to the draft official plan be listed with notations on how they have or have not been addressed in the draft and brought to the committee of the whole meeting today for review. We have broken this presentation into 5 parts to align with the resolution passed by council, and that's how the report was written. Unless council prefers otherwise, what we propose is to present each part and then pause for questions or clarifications before proceeding to the next section. So if that's okay with your worship,
And
council's
that's
consent.
fine by me. Any objections from council? I see none. Please go ahead.
All right. We're also trying something new because usually in a meeting like this, Andrea and I would be sitting side by side, and as you're giving us questions, we could consult one another on the proposed answer. So what we're trying to do today is we're linked by cell phone. So if there is a question that we're unsure of the answer, so that we can consult with each other or take the lead in answering. So that's just something new that we're trying tonight. So some key considerations before we get started. And MJ alluded to this earlier. So we have actually completed 2 rounds of public consultation with provincial ministries, the county, over the course of 2019 and 2020. We have made every effort to accommodate everyone's interests. In cases where suggested changes could not be accommodated, explanations were provided. In November, the final draft official plan showing all the proposed modifications was placed on the township website and as well as recirculated to all interested parties for one final review. And staff were able to satisfy a large portion of the comments from interested parties. With respect to the resolution, there was no opportunity to provide analysis of these changes at that meeting, so that's the purpose of today. And since the December 15th meeting, we have received multiple objections from parties who were previously supportive of the draft official plan and are now not supporting it. These are things to keep in mind as we go through this. So I'm going to turn this part over to Andrea, and she will take us through some of the amendments in a moment. But just before we start, I just wanted to point out that we have taken the direction and preparing the necessary amendments to the official plan with respect to those amendments that were passed on the 15th. And while we are supportive of a number of changes, we do have concerns with several others that we feel require further discussion and consideration tonight at council. We have grouped these 36 amendments into 3 categories. So first is amendments that are supported by staff. And for those, please refer to the attached table for analysis. We won't be going through those in any great detail, but Andrea will speak to those in a moment. Then there are amendments that are partially supported by staff that with some modification we could support. And then there are others that are problematic and cannot be supported by staff. And regarding the latter, they aren't being supported because they would conflict with applicable law, example, the Planning Act, the provincial policy statement, or the county official plan, or proper planning principles, or because it touches on an area where we've engaged another ministry, for example, OMAFRA. The wording in there was crafted to meet their satisfaction, so changing that, we require feedback still from them on whether they would support something like that. So turning over to the amendments supported by staff, and I'll turn it over to Andrea at this point.
Yes, thank you, Bowden, and through you, Mr. Chair. So I'll start off just briefly, just outlining some of the amendments supported by staff. So overall, there was 12 amendments that were included in the draft official plan that staff are supportive of. So some of the more larger examples of these changes that included removing the references to the KFLNA Health Unit in regards to approval for septic systems. So we're definitely supportive of that, and that was a great catch in that the municipality has taken over the approval of sewage systems as of January 1st of this year. So we are also doing a review of the plan to make sure that any references to that are also caught as well and changed. We're also supportive of adding reference to innovative housing designs to allow for tiny houses and micro units. So there is an existing policy that allows for consideration of these. And I should note that minimum dwelling unit sizes are regulated in the zoning bylaw, but we're definitely supportive of adding a policy in the higher level policy framework regarding considering those to promote affordable housing. And then we also were supportive of adding the ability for a proponent to come forward to council if there's issues in regards to conflicts in what they feel what studies are required to support a development application. So next slide, please. So moving on to the next slide being amendments that are partially supported by staff. So these two amendments here were primarily with respect to growth management objectives and policies, where there was wording that was changed from directing development to the urban settlement area and changed to encouraging appropriate development to these areas. As well as more permissive policy language regarding providing appropriate rural growth and that the rural settlement area will grow and flourish. So staff are supportive of stating and using the word appropriate rural development, as the provincial policy statement does permit locally appropriate rural development. So we don't have any concerns in that regard. However, the provincial policy statement does have to be read as one full document when looking at its policies. And it does focus growth to the settlement areas. And so we are proposing that wording in the provincial policy be utilized. In discussing appropriate development, we can't be supportive of permissive language in terms of growing and flourishing the rural area, as the rural area contains significant strict constraints such as highly vulnerable aquifers, significant groundwater recharge areas, there's significant bedrock resources, as well as natural heritage features. And I think another piece to note as well in when we're looking at potentially like encouraging development into our rural areas is the fact that rural development also results in increased pressures on our township roads, which aren't capable of sustaining large volumes of traffic. We've been talking a lot about transit as well and creating complete communities, and transit is also more costly and difficult to provide in the rural areas, and waste management is also more expensive as well. So there's a number of different considerations on why we're recommending to take the PPS direction and encouraging that growth into the settlement areas in order to utilize our existing infrastructure. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's also a number of amendments that were included in the draft official plan that staff are unable to support because they would conflict with planning legislation.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but my understanding that the format for tonight, you were going to read each section and then open each section for questions rather than wait till the end. Did I hear Mr. Bowden correctly? Mr.
So what I meant by each section was each part of the report. So it's in 5 parts. So we're still in part 1. Once we do all the amendments, we'll stop and then we can go back and talk about any one of them. That was okay. That was what I was suggesting.
Okay, thank you.
Move to the next report.
All right, thank you.
Please go ahead, Ms. Furness.
Okay, thank you. With respect, so there's 3 main Planning Act considerations that we do want to raise. One of them being the first amendment that was changed was to remove being consistent with the provincial policy statement and only having consideration for it. So the Planning Act, I want to say was about 2005, 2006, had changed that to be consistent with the provincial policy statement. Before that time, it used to have wording that said have regard to. So this was a change that was made several years ago, and does require that all municipalities be consistent with provincial policy when making planning decisions. And so in this case, it's not something that we can recommend due to that specific requirement in the Planning Act, which is also repeated in the County of Lennox and Addington's official plan as well. Next slide, please. Moving forward, the next Planning Act requirement is that lower tier municipalities shall conform with the upper tier official plan. So again, this is a requirement that is in the Planning Act. So in the situation that the county may have an official plan policy that could potentially be more restrictive than the township's official plan policy, there was proposed wording that the least restrictive provision could prevail. So in this case, we wouldn't be able to recommend that as per the Planning Act, which would require the county's official plan to take precedence over ours. And also in terms of the next amendment was in regards to official plans being reviewed every 5 years or being reviewed every 10 years. It could be reviewed every 10 years in the Planning Act in the situation that an official plan was completely repealed and an entire new one was adopted. So it's a whole new official plan rather than a review. So the proposed official plan literally took that wording directly out of the Planning Act. And so we couldn't support using wording such as may update the plan every 5 years, because it is a requirement under legislation that we have to abide by. Next slide, please. Okay. So this these ones as well, I won't get into these ones again. It's rural development, and again, we are supportive of changing the wording to speak to appropriate, but I won't repeat some of the other comments are the same in terms of the comments on rural development as well as the provincial policy statement. So I think we can move to the next slide. So the amendment on this slide, this is in regards to the provincial policy statement again, so I won't repeat that one. And then the second one is in regards to servicing objectives. So this speaks to if adding the word if appropriate in terms of requiring servicing, stormwater management, and transportation studies. So I think it's important to highlight that this policy is specifically speaking to significant large-scale developments. So traffic, servicing, and stormwater are some of the major considerations that are part of the review of those types of development proposals. So we would be supportive of adding additional policy language that if appropriate for small-scale developments. But in terms of large-scale developments, we would be a bit concerned about putting ourselves in a position to open up policy where arguments could start to be made about that there may not be required when typically these would always be an immediate ask in terms of these types of developments to ensure that we're properly planning effectively and considering all the infrastructure needs. Next slide, please. So these amendments on this slide here, the first one's in relation to an existing transportation objective that is in the township's current plan that encourages future development on publicly maintained roads. And so the amendment proposes to add or on roads where it's feasible and safe to do so. So there are some concerns with encouraging development on maintained roads, particularly with respect to emergency response times and potential maintenance issues. And I would note as well that even if it can be confirmed that it might be feasible and might be safe to do so, it can also result in increased pressures for the municipality over time, where we start to get pressures into maintaining the roads as residents can start to want some of those same services and road upgrades and plowing and everything that the other roads offer. So that would be the concern there. I would also note in this particular one that it is an objective, so it is encouraging, and it is the zoning bylaw that does prohibit it. So I believe that there has been even a zoning bylaw amendment done in the past that could particularly look at it if a zoning amendment needed to allow a development on an unmaintained road. In regards to the next one, this next amendment's in relation to adding the word neighboring in terms of engaging with Indigenous communities. And we're not supportive of this policy change, as there may be additional Indigenous communities that are not directly next door to us that may have an interest. There's different examples of some of these different communities that are not directly our neighbors, as well as there may be individuals within the township that may identify with certain Indigenous communities. So we would definitely want to ensure that we're not restricting engagement in this regard, or at least potentially giving the impression that it's being promoted that we only need to engage with the neighboring Indigenous communities. Next slide, please. So both these two policy amendments identified in this slide are in relation to environmental impact assessments, and the amendments were to require consultation with the Conservation Authority to the satisfaction of the township, rather than the studies being to the satisfaction of the Conservation Authority. We would suggest maybe some additional wording here to say that when the Conservation Authority is the township's peer reviewer for environmental impact assessments, that it be deemed to their satisfaction. And this is important as the township does not have in-house ecologists. And so we don't have that expertise to critically review an environmental impact study. So as a result, we would never be in a position to criticize or deem an environmental impact statement to be satisfactory without confirmation from the Conservation Authority. Next slide, please. In terms of, oh, okay, no, I think I'm going on to Boda now. I think I'm done.
Sorry, yeah.
Talking too much, I'll let you go.
Okay.
So I'll take it over to Boda now. Thank you.
Okay, so moving along. So number 20, Amendment 20, it talks about a secondary dwelling on a farm for accommodating farm laborer. It currently says shall not be severed from the farm unit, and it was proposed with the amendment to add unless such a severance meets the rules of consents. So we are against this one because severance for lands for farm labor are not supported because it fragments agricultural land. It has the effect of affecting the future viability of the agricultural parcel. And this kind of thing is specifically noted in OMAFRA provincial guidance documents on how to interpret the PPS. So, so we are not supportive of this one. Number 21, similar. So the policy is specifically to permit an accessory residential use. The consent policies are not applicable in this situation because once it is severed, it would no longer be an accessory use. So we're not supportive of that particular change. This one, I'm just quickly, this is one of the ones we worked closely with OMAFRA to develop these policies. And it was OMAFRA that provided the 40-hectare minimum farm size. So again, we cannot support this because regarding the second part, especially part F, the intent of these policies was to prevent large-scale commercial tourism that would require significant structures on prime ag land, such as banquet facilities. And this is one of the ones where we have reached out to OMAFRA just to consult with them, but we haven't received a comment back. In this one, number 29, this has to do with high density residential, that it be on the periphery of low density designations, and preferably add the word if feasible about medium density areas, commercial areas and open space. Change where feasible and have direct access to a collector arterial road and not draw traffic through low density areas wherever possible to do so. We feel this is a problematic, perhaps dangerous change to make. We already think that the existing policy provides some flexibility, but by using the word preferably, but we don't want to do is create a situation that actually encourages high density residential that are not on main arterial roads for obvious reasons. But we will be supportive of providing some additional flexibility to the policy as noted above. This number 30 deals with hamlet areas, remove no negative impact and add minimal impact, and remove it shall also be limited to infilling and minor rounding out of development. Again, this would put us into conflict, in our opinion, with the county official plan as well as the provincial policy statement for the reasons that they're listed there and in the report. Finally, under 32, this has to do with the consent policies. New lot must be a minimum of 20 hectares. Again, stating that this was in consultations with OMAFRA, the 40 hectares is the number that we came up with. It's also consistent with our zoning bylaw, and we're waiting for a response from the ministry on that one. Number 34, regarding secondary suites, the land in which secondary suite is located. So this is on a same parcel of land, but it's a separate building, cannot be severed from the property. The request or the amendment spoke to adding unless it meets the rules of consent. So this is again not supported, because if the secondary unit was severed, it would no longer be quote unquote a secondary accessory dwelling unit, and these policies would no longer be applicable. Oh, that's the end of part 1.
Okay, and now is the time. Now is the time for the questions.
Now's the time for the question.
Right. Council. Anyone? Councilor Porter, go ahead.
Yes, I do have a couple of questions and some comments about section 1. And I just will go through them as quickly as I can. Is it possible to stop screen sharing at this time? Because I can't.
Yes, I can do that. Let me figure out how to do that. I have to go back here.
There we are.
Before you voting.
Okay. First, I want to say thank you very much. The report was very well done. So kudos to the person that wrote the report. It made it very easy to read, and it certainly did point out some areas that needed work for sure. But I do want to comment on the items that are not supported by staff. And I'll go through them in the same order that you guys listed them. So the first one was the word consistent. The proposal was to keep the wording that we had prior, which was take into consideration the provincial policy. That wording was passed over the last 2 reviews, long after the provincial policy statement was updated. That's just, I mean, it's certainly something that we need to look at, but that is just a comment I have in regards to that. And it was accepted by the county and by the province in the last 2 reviews. So I'm not sure why all of a sudden we have to change that wording. Because it does kind of denote that, you know, that we don't have say in provincial policy, we don't have say in county official plan. And I think words are very important to make sure that we keep our grassroots ability in the democratic process. Number 2, so this is something that is really troubling to me in regards to the county official plan. And I'd like to speak to it again. I know the mayor has spoken to it prior, but the whole intent, and we were basically sold on the fact when the county did their official plan, that they would draw from all the municipal, lower tier municipalities within the county, that they would draw from those official plans to formulate their official plan. So it's really important that we keep that ability to do so. And I understand it has to conform, that our official plan has to conform with the counties. But to me, it would be up to the county to look at what our official plan is and make changes to theirs to allow us to be in conformity. And then that's why that one was proposed. Number 4. So I think number 4 has been misinterpreted. Number 4, the reason that that amendment was put forward is that I believe every term of council should have the opportunity to review the official plan. So the intent on that was that the official plan would be up for review every 5 years as opposed to 10. And that I know the word may revise the plan. It wasn't intended to say that they wouldn't review it every 5 years, but they would review it and they may revise it, or they may just accept it as is. And that is part of a review. We've seen that many times before, where there's been no changes to the official plan. It was solely reviewed and accepted as is. So having said that, 10 years doesn't give each term of council the ability to review it. I think a 10-year period is too long. You could get a whole new council in and they should have that opportunity. So that's why I wanted it, it was proposed to go back to every 5 years. So number 5, so let me see my notes here. Number 5. So remove existing settlement areas. Rural development is encouraged where appropriate. So I'm going to draw attention to the provincial policy statement here, and on section 1.1.5.2c of the provincial policy statement, which permits locally appropriate residential development of rural lands. Section 1.1.5.4 further states that development that is compatible with the rural landscape and can be sustained by rural service levels should be promoted. And that I quoted the section. So if those sections are out of date or not current, you can let me know that. Where am I here? Okay, number 7, sorry. Staff recommend a stronger word being used. I suggest the word focus rather than encourage. I mean, that's just mincing words, really, in my opinion. That's just, they both mean the same thing. Number 8, again, back to, I made that point earlier about having regard to the provincial policy statement. It was accepted the last 2 reviews after the last provincial policy update. And number 9, I'm glad that you agree that there needs to be some sort of wording here to clarify that it is intended to large scale development and not all development. And number 11. So the reason for this amendment was so that people like in anybody on cottage country where there is a road going in that's unmaintained by the township, so that they had the opportunity to build a cottage or a house or whatever they choose to do. In my mind, it's up to the public whether they decide that they're going to build on an unmaintained road. You know, they are aware of all the downfalls and pitfalls of doing so. And that's why the amendment said where it was feasible and safe to do so. And that should be a decision made by the individual, not by the township. People are adults and mature and know what risks they're undertaking when they're building in a rural area that has a cottage road, etc. to the properties. And just the rationale that it might add pressure for us to start maintaining the road. Well, to me, that kind of rationale, although you know it is a good point, it shouldn't be the determining factor. People that are building on unmaintained roads know that right up front. Number 12, no problems with that whatsoever. Number 16, so number 16, the Conservation Authority is an agency like any other agency. When we go for peer review to, let's say, an engineer to peer review an engineering document, we don't make them the final decision makers. We still hold that decision. And I think council is smart enough to know that if a peer reviewer is finding something problematic, council would address that. But ultimately, I believe the decision should always rest with council, and taking into account what our peer review agency is saying. As a matter of fact, that was the intent of the Conservation Authority. It wasn't to make decisions on our behalf, but it was to give us the information that we need in order for us to make that decision. And that's what we are elected to do so. And as we all know, the Conservation Authority, that is something that we could opt out of if we so chose. I'm not saying that we would, but it is it's not acceptable that a peer review agency be the decision maker. Say this goes with 17. So number 20, I'm not sure if there's been any kind of delineation between prime agricultural and simply agricultural lands. As we all know, there's a lot of rural areas in our municipality that agricultural land is not being used for agricultural purposes and haven't been used for agricultural purposes for many, many years. You know, we have lands that people own that have lots of rock and cedars on, and they haven't been used for farming in decades, if not centuries. So I'm not sure why we're grouping prime and agricultural on the same category. So it's the same with item number 21. We talk about fragmented farms, but you know, fragmenting something that hasn't been used as a farm in centuries, it just does not make sense as a valid argument. And number 22, I will be interested to hear what Amafra has to say about that. You know, we do want tourism. We do want alternate uses of estate and farm wineries, cideries, and microbreweries. I think council's made that pretty clear in the past that we do want to encourage business in the municipality. So number 25 says remove limited, add appropriate, and unstrike estate residential. If you're striking out estate residential, I'm going to refer back to the provincial policy statement, section 1.15 and 0.2.c. I won't read it again, I've already read it, but it certainly does encourage estate residential, and it does say that it should be supported. So I don't think that should be struck out. It's been in there since the last provincial policy statement update, and taking it out now, I think, is a real disservice. So number 27, I think we all know that we have not had any apartments or affordable housing built in our municipality for 50 years. Can I actually say that? 50 years? It's in 40 years, correct me if I'm wrong, 40 years. So we have to ask ourselves why. Why is that? And some of the language in the medium and high density here, number 27, 28, and 29, certainly prohibits that. We have a large municipality, we have large areas that could be developed, and we do not have collector and major roads going through all the areas of our municipality. And that certainly does not, the way it was written, certainly does not support that kind of development and makes it almost impossible. So we really need to look at that very closely as to how we can encourage apartments and affordable housing. We've talked about it for a long time, yet nothing has been done. And this is one area that we can look at and that we can amend to help that along, and throughout the whole municipality, not just in Amherstview. And that's really important, very important. Many people live in the rural areas. They want to stay in the rural areas. They want an apartment in the rural area or in the hamlets or in Odessa or wherever the case may be. And that's something that definitely cannot, in my opinion, stay the same. However you decide that, or however we decide to word that. Number 32, yes, I'll be looking forward to a response from MAFRA. Number 34, it's kind of, number 34 is kind of an oxymoron. You're saying because it's a secondary unit, we can't sever it, because if we sever it, it won't be a secondary unit. I don't understand the rationale behind that, because it is, in my opinion, an oxymoron. And I think that's all the comments that I have for that section.
Thank you. And Ms. Furness or Mr. Winicky, you wish to make comment or respond?
There was a lot said. I'm not sure about the previous reasons why we had to have regard to after the PPS was changed in 2005 to be consistent with. Interesting thing to look into, but I'm not familiar with the circumstances that led to that. Yeah, I mean, I don't have any specific. Andrea, do you want to comment on any specific comments that were just made?
Yeah, maybe the one thing to add in terms of the previous official plan, which I believe ended up getting approved in the last amendment 2008, but I believe was started prior to those changes in the Planning Act. So the purpose of this official plan was also to acknowledge that of this review was that we were not consistent with the provincial policy statement. So the last review that was done was on the verge of when that was just being changed. So I think that's why the previous one went through the way it is at that point. So that's just a comment on that. If there's anything specific, I'm happy to provide comments on as well. If anybody wants staff input on that too, I can look at my notes here on.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of council have a question or comment with regard to this first section of the report? Deputy, go ahead.
Thank you. I have probably pushing half a dozen questions here. Some I think they can probably respond to easily. Other ones they may need to look up. So starting at number 11, it talks about building on a unmaintained road. I understood, and this is only I understood. I don't know if it actually stated it or not, that if somebody wanted to build on, if there was a road allowance that was along your property and you wanted to build along the unopened road allowance, you could upgrade the road to this township standard. And if the township is agreeable, and then the township would maintain it from then on, similar to any other development where the developer would construct the road. And I'm not sure if that still is an option, or if it's not an option anymore. So that was my question on that one. 21, sorry, I have to go between my glasses. There's a few places here where it mentions, 21 is one of them. And there's a couple other places where it's a requirement to still meet the MDS for accessory or secondary units and things like that. But those units can never be severed. So according, like the way it stands right now. So I guess my question there is, who states that it must follow the MDS? Because typically, if you were building I guess the way I look at it is, if I was building a secondary unit for a labor or a family member, and it was never going to be severed, then that would really be no different than the primary residence, which typically would be well within the MDS. And anyone that would be residing in that property would be very well aware of the sight, smells, and sounds of the farm life. So that's sort of a general question with a few different locations. Okay. When it comes to number 27, it has the comment about only convenient access to transit routes. Is there a way of, or should we be adding something in there, basically planned or designated transit routes? Because I guess what I'm looking at is right now there's only a very limited area within Amherst View that would meet that criteria, and we don't know when that's going to change. But even with our secondary plan, we're probably going to have plans for transit in that area. So really, we should be looking at something more than just single-family homes along the routes that are planned. And once that plan is approved by council, then we could assume that at the appropriate time, the transit would be developed, if it's not developed for the rest of the township already ahead of time. But I'm just looking at that way, we're still meeting the criteria for having transit accessible. It's just that the transit may not be there at this time. And I'm thinking not so much infilling, but new development. We'd be running into that with almost every new development. I'm glad we're waiting for responses on the others from Mafra, and put the glass on one more time. Oh, okay, I've already spoke to that one. So that was all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Staff, did you wish to make comment on any of those? Ms. Furness, go ahead.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair. I would say yes, in regards to the first question being on maintained roads and whether they can be upgraded and so on, that is an opportunity that's still there. I think if someone wanted to do those expenses, it was a conversation we had recently with someone in an inquiry that we had. I think in terms of this policy, it's more just it was about encouraging on maintained roads, not without the intent that they were going to be upgrading them and maintaining them and paying for those themselves. In terms of the second one in regards to minimum distance separation for secondary units. So that applies, and the intent of that is to apply to detached secondary units. So if they're permitted in the rural areas, essentially they could be fairly far back in the property. So we're trying not, so adding an additional permanent home on there, we didn't want to enhance any incompatibility with similar to when you do sever a lot and not complying. Someone could buy that lot knowing that there's a farm nearby, but over time there could be, I think it could still raise the same issues into terms of potential complaints in those pieces that we want to try to avoid. I do understand the point in regards to there is a different situation if it is a separate dwelling unit for a farm laborer. So we have included that in a separate policy section. So if it is for farm laborers that are needed to support a farm and need additional housing, then those minimum distance separation requirements would not have to be met because that is housing directly related to the farm. In terms of transit routes, we did change the policy as Councillor Porter had suggested. That was one of the supportive ones where we'd say transit routes as applicable. I personally, and I can discuss with Bowden as well, I don't personally have any concerns with amending that even further to say on planned or designated transit routes. I think that's a good point that we obviously don't want to set something up that's not possible at this time as well. So was that all of them or did I miss one?
Okay, thank you. And any other members of council have questions with regard to comments or questions with regard to section 1? Seeing none. Okay, I'm not sure if it's Ms. Furness or Mr. Winicky, but go on, you can go on to section 2.
Thank you. I'll just bring up the screen. Bear with me while I find it. There it is. All right. How do I get full screen here? Sorry. Is it showing the full screen on for you folks?
It's showing it as if it's still in PowerPoint, not a slideshow. As in we can see the sidebars.
Okay. Now I might have to go back to the beginning then. Having technical difficulties.
I think if you hit F5, it should start.
Oh, it's resolution.
Bowden, it may be showing on your other screen, is it? Because typically once you start the slideshow, do you have 2 screens?
Yeah, but it's not on that screen either.
Look behind it, maybe.
Can council see clearly enough in this format? Okay, I'm seeing nodded heads.
There.
Okay,
A little better?
that's a little better. I think you can go ahead with that.
Okay. So part 2, the rules of consent. This is the report that was asked of us to come back and look at the impact should we adopt the same rules as the township of Stone Mills. So just in terms of background, staff did prepare an analysis of the different policies, that is Stone Mills, so Frontenac, Greater Napanee and Prince Edward County, and the City of Kingston. That was SR 1223 in November of 2019. So we're revisiting that now. The point I wanted to start off making is it sounds like a relatively benign request, but it actually is a very long and complicated effort to try and take Stone Mill's consent policies and apply them to Loyalist. First of all, their eligibility date is different than ours. We need to look at each lot to see where they are in terms of whether they qualify for another severance or not. And each lot would also have to be examined to see if they qualify for severance under their consent rules. For example, their minimum lot sizes are different. For the retained portion, zoning setbacks, everything is different. So it sounds like an easy thing to go and do, but it's actually a very difficult thing to do properly. But having said that, I think we can say with quite a bit of confidence some of the things that are further in this. Our policies are designed to protect against the fragmentation of land and the proliferation of lots throughout the rural area, which could result in pressure to overextend municipal services such as roads, school busing, garbage collection, and the provision of recreational services. The majority of the township, as was mentioned earlier, has highly vulnerable aquifer and sensitive groundwater recharge areas, which are now mapped out in Schedule K of the new official plan. And we know for a fact, based on our experience, that development on private services does tend to experience more water quantity and quality challenges. In that analysis that was run in 2019, we did determine that based on the current absorption rate, we actually have 100+ years of housing supply under the existing official plan policies in the rural area. So again, the business case for doing this in light of that is not that strong. Also wanted to point out the Stone Mills has very minimal prime agricultural areas and no serviced areas. So that's the only way they can grow is through consents. We have tried to accommodate some of these requests by adding a new policy which would allow an additional consent if there is 1 kilometer of frontage. So that is a new policy that we put in. I just wanted to bring in this slide because since council is in the heated throes of trying to get a 4% budget increase passed, this is timely. This slide comes from a think tank that conducts lots of data analysis. They don't have something similar in terms of a projection for rural development, but I can assure you, and it is entirely logical to assume that the contrast would be even greater. So what you have here is the cost to the municipality. This is for urban sprawl, for suburban versus urban growth, and you see the number there. It's more than 2.5 times larger, and these are the basic municipal services that residents expect. So the cost to do for rural development is even higher. Thus, I guess the point is, if it's council's goal to reduce the pressure on the township to raise taxes, promoting more rural development is not the way to do it. In fact, it takes you in the complete opposite direction. I feel like I'm missing a slide here. Anyway, that's the conclusion of part 2.
Okay, council, any questions with regard to the part 2 analysis with comparison to Stone Mills? Anyone? Okay, seeing none, we move on to section 3.
I have some questions in regards to section 2.
Okay, sorry, Councilor Porter, go ahead. I can't see you.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. The screen sharing throws me off, and I have to fiddle with my screen to get me back up when the screen sharing on. So sorry about that. Yeah, just a quick comment about the last slide where you said that the suburban cost versus, I guess you can't bring it up or you mess up our screen, but
I can.
the suburban cost versus the urban cost. And I guess that's been a point of contention, because, you know, we have we're not with consents, they're not being requested on roads that aren't existing. So to me, if you add more lots on existing roads, the cost would go down per household. Like, you already have garbage trucks going down the road, you already have the snowplow going down the road. So if you were to add additional lots in the suburban area, which, you know, you said that was the rural development, those costs per household to me would go down, not up. That's the one point I wanted to make. The other point is specific to the report in regards to severances, and I thank you very much for presenting this again, and I appreciate the fact that it's not an easy thing to do. But I must say that I was a little disappointed in that more information wasn't provided, and more information in the sense that, you know, the comparison of lot sizes and road frontage with Kingston. We've heard this over and over again, and I don't know if it's accurate or not, but we've heard that our consent policies are more restrictive than rural Kingston, than rural Napanee, and certainly more restrictive than Stone Mill. So there's no information here in this report that would allow me to come to a conclusion as to whether that is the case or not. So I think this we need more information on it. You know, and I understand the point about our aquifers and protecting the environment, and I certainly respect that, and certainly would not want to do or suggest that we do anything to compromise those issues. However, when somebody applies for a consent to sever, there's also the possibility of them having to go through the process of, you know, as they do with the tile bed, it has to be an appropriate lot for a tile bed, and they have to be able to show that they can put an appropriate system in. You know, and as we all know, with the new tile beds, the filtration that occurs certainly is excellent at protecting our groundwater. So there's additional information that's needed here. It doesn't give us enough to be able to say with confidence that we feel, in my opinion, that I feel that our policies our consent policies are sound and not too restrictive. So that's what I would like to see, a little more information. As difficult as it may be, I think we need to be more informed on that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from council? Okay, seeing none, we can move on to the next section.
Okay. Everyone seeing that?
Still looking at the impact on municipal budget.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, I'll turn it over to Andrea, who will do part 3.
Okay, thank you, Bowden. So as council directed, it was requested that staff explore the definition of residential unit in the official plan, more specifically the disparity between large and small units. So the definition was reviewed, and we can confirm that the official plan does not doesn't place any limitations in terms of residential unit sizes. So it is the township zoning bylaw that has specific regulations regarding the minimum dwelling unit sizes. During the comprehensive review of the zoning bylaw, we're going to be conducting an analysis to look at these to see if we can make them more permissible in order to promote affordable housing. There may be some residential zones that may be appropriate to remove a minimum dwelling unit size altogether, and they would just defer to the requirements under the Ontario Building Code. But it is correct that currently right now our zoning bylaw does have requirements above what the minimum building code requires in terms of unit sizes. So if someone did want to do a micro unit, for example, right now they'd most likely require zoning bylaw amendment or a minor variance. So we are definitely supportive of doing a review of this and looking at that to promote affordable housing. However, the official plan itself doesn't prevent the review of looking at those dwelling unit sizes as part of the zoning bylaw review. And it should be noted as well, we did, as directed, which we're supportive of, is including that new amendment in the official plan to kind of set the policy framework to consider innovative housing designs such as micro units. So that's what I had on that. If there's any questions on residential units.
Any questions with regard to the residential unit piece?
Yes.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Penny.
Yes, so I think again, this might have been misinterpreted. I'm not sure, but it wasn't so much the size of the unit that was at question. It was more like, it says here, the current definition of residential unit in the official plan reads as follows. Residential unit means a unit that consists of a self-contained set of rooms located in a building or structure, is used or intended for use as residential premises, contains kitchen and bathroom facilities that are intended for the use of the unit only. So, you know, when I look at the official plan for Kingston and what they used for high and medium and low density is completely different than what we do. And that's where I think we fall down here, is that we're comparing, in our official plan, we're comparing a large house that could house 8 to 10 people with a small unit that could only house 2 people. So we're saying that those two are equal in density, basically in our official plan, which doesn't make a lot of sense, because density, in my opinion, or correct me if I'm wrong, but density sort of measures how much services are going to be used, how many people are in this specific area, you know, how many. So if that, to me, the intent wasn't to say, let's look at dwelling size, because I know under the building code, there is a minimum dwelling size for single family homes. There's a minimum. I'm not sure if there's a minimum dwelling size for an apartment, but the whole point of that was that we're not comparing apples to oranges here. We're saying that a large structure that can house 10 people is equivalent to a very small structure that can house 1 or 2 people, and that density is measured the same way. And I think we really need to look at what Kingston does, what other municipalities do, and see what we can do here, because you know, if we're qualifying density limitations on the number of units, then we must not compare apples to oranges, and we must not say that a large unit that can house 10 people is equal to a small unit that can house 1 or 2. That was the point of that.
Thank you. Any comment from staff on that? Ms. Furness, go ahead.
I just wouldn't mind, if it's okay, a little bit of clarification. So it's the density provisions itself, the way they're measured as number of units per net hectare, in the way we calculate that. Is that where the concern is?
Yes.
Okay. Can look at it a bit. I know the city of Kingston also uses a measurement of units per net hectare. So, okay, might just need to look into a little bit. Yeah,
And just for my clarity, is that within the official plan or is that within the zoning bylaw?
So density per net hectare and how density is calculated is in the official plan.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on this section? Seeing none, we move to the list of recent official plan amendments.
Okay, so so council did also request a listing of official plan amendments and minor variance applications over the last few years. So there is a table attached before you with the report this evening that does contain a listing of the official plan amendments and minor variance applications received in 2018, 19, and 20. With respect to official plan amendments, there has been 5 that were received and processed. All those amendments were very site-specific, unique conditions in terms of asking for increased density or to address very specific site servicing requirements. So essentially, they were, well, staff's of the opinion that they were all appropriate to address and as an amendment to the official plan. So there wouldn't be any sort of patterns or trends that we noticed within those 5 that would suggest that we should be making any general policy changes as a result of them. With respect to minor variance applications, on the other hand, that have a much larger increased volume of applications, where we received processed 38 applications from 2018 to 2020. And in this case, there are some trends that can be noticed, but I would note that minor variance applications require minor relief from provisions in the zoning bylaw. So we don't recommend that there's any changes that need to that would be made to the official plan that would reduce minor variance applications. However, we're definitely very supportive and think it's a great idea to review these trends as part of the zoning bylaw review. I believe a public member commented on that as well at the last public meeting, because there are some trends that are noticed, and I think that there's a few tweaks that can be made to the zoning bylaw when we go through that process, as we definitely are supportive and do not want people to have to go through minor variances that aren't necessary.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Porter.
Yeah, so thank you very much for doing that. I think what precipitated this was the Committee of Adjustment brought to council's attention a couple of applications that put the proponent in, in a spot where they had to pay additional monies to do minor variance to do something that shouldn't have had to go through the process. And in particular, and I can only think of one example off the top of my head, but I think there was 2 or 3 in the course of the last few years. One example was that a gentleman had to bring a minor variance application forward in order to replace his deck that had existed for decades. And because it had not, under the new regulations, it didn't meet the criteria. So that kind of thing, we just want to bring to the attention that stuff like that should be grandfathered in. Someone should not have to go to the process of getting a minor variance and then a building permit just to replace the deck that had existed. And that, that puts a lot of, construction cost is high enough as it is without having to put people through that process to repair and maintain their property. That's just the one example. I was hoping that something would in this report, in this chart, that would trigger the other example, but there was another example where it seemed very unnecessary to put the applicant through a minor variance or an official plan amendment for something that needed to be done and that had been in existence for a long, long time.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. I think staff had also indicated that most of those and the trends within that would be addressed through the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, which might be the better place for that, and more effective place for that.
But may I interject that
Yes.
Sometimes the language within the official plan does not allow for the zoning change. That's all I wanted. That's why I wanted to address at the official plan level.
Okay. Any other comments with regard to section 4? Seeing none, I guess we'll move on to section 5.
All right, that's back to me. So attached to the staff report is a document called the Summary of Public Comments. And this is a sort of a living document. We've continuously updated this document. And if you look there, it's color coded so that in this case, it has 4 categories. Green being it's just a comment or question, no need for an official plan amendment or OP modification, sorry. The second is a blue category where change is requested and supported. And then there's a yellow, which change is requested, but it's not appropriate for the OP, such as the discussion we just had, where, you know, it's probably more appropriate to deal with it either in the comprehensive zoning bylaw, or in one case it was through the master parks plan or sort of something like that. And then finally, in purple, we had highlighted any change request that was requested but not supported by staff. So you'll find that document in there, and it's up to date as of the date of writing this report last week. So we have received additional comments over the course of the last few days. Those comments will be populated into this and shared with council at the next appropriate time.
Thank you. Any questions or comments with regard to this report? I'm seeing none. I think that brings us to the end of the 5 stages.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm scrolling as we do this because it's a long document. And
yeah, it starts at page 278 of 442 in your document.
With that being the end of the 5 sections, does staff have any further comments before we go to council for the next steps?
I have some just concluding remarks, if you will.
Please go ahead.
So I just wanted to stress that our goal from the beginning of this exercise was to deliver an updated official plan that meets provincial policy requirements, the needs of the community, and the strategic goals of the township. The outcomes we all seek here is a new official plan with little or no appeals. Appeals cost money. They are a huge stress on our limited planning division resources, and they would come at a time when we need to focus on things like developing the new secondary plan and updating the comprehensive zoning bylaw. In the event there still are appeals, we want to be put in a position as staff as to be able to defend council's position effectively at the tribunal. Should all the amendments stay as is and be adopted by council, we would be in a difficult position of not being able to support some of the recommendation or parts of our own official plan. And that would be problematic for both us and for council. So we are looking for some direction from council tonight with respect to further action on these amendments. And that direction will determine whether the draft official plan needs to go, like, for example, if some of those changes are significant, like if we change the consent policies. We never had any public meetings on that. We never consulted with the public or any of the agencies on that. We would have to start that again. So that would significantly delay adoption of the new official plan. And so depending on what you decide, that will determine the next stages in finalizing this official plan. That's it for me, Your Worship.
Thank you. And I'll go to council. Right. We have some recommendations before us, primarily seeking direction. Right. I do understand, had a chat with the clerk earlier, and she might want to correct me on this, but procedurally, because we did receive and pass a resolution accepting those amendments December 15th, if we wish to make changes to that list of amendments, that would be a motion to amend something previously adopted. Actually, if I may, Madam Clerk, clarity, would we do that during the committee of the whole, or would we do that as a notice to the next council meeting?
Your worship, there's nothing that I could find in our procedure bylaw that states that those motions couldn't be done at a committee of the whole. Again, the idea is that like anything that's done at a committee of the whole has to be ratified through council. So even whatever's done here today is ratified at the next regular council meeting when the minutes would come before council for adoption. So that was the information that I found on that.
Okay. The wording around the motion to amend something previously adopted requires a notice of motion.
Yes.
And therefore, how do we take the notice of motion now if we choose to do that?
So a notice to amend something previously adopted is a main motion that would require notice through a notice of motion and a 2/3 majority vote to pass. So again, it's the consideration and it would require, because it's a procedural motion, that it would require a 2/3 vote to even put it on the floor.
Understood. But if we have to have a notice of motion, does that mean we can't do that tonight?
It's up to your worship as to whether you want to consider it tonight or whether you would leave it till March 8th meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, council, we have a number of comments made from staff with regard to the potential amendments, and I'm looking for your input. Councillor Porter, go ahead.
I have a motion to put forward.
Okay. And if the motion is appropriate, can you share it with us?
Well, I'm going to read off the recommendation from the report. I move that the report from the Development Services Division dated February 22nd, re-official plan comprehensive review be received, and that any public and agency comments received on and since December 15th be reviewed and considered by council prior to final approval, and that council direct staff to put the amended draft official plan out for public consultation with another public meeting. And that's, and if I can get a seconder, I can explain the rationale behind that.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Or, sorry, do we have clarity amongst council on the intent of that motion? I'm seeing no questions. So do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Gordon seconds. Councillor Porter, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. You know, I understand this has been a really arduous process and it seems to have taken a long time. We started this process back in 2019. We put it on the shelf for many months. We had public consultation back in 2019. We did ask for more public consultation, but it's been a discombobulated process because of the pandemic and because of the delays. Now, I understand that staff wants to get this done right away, but I also think that it's prudent that with so many amendments, I want to hear from people. I want people to have the opportunity to review the amendments as put forward and get their input again. It is a democratic process. I know that there was, I can't say they're major amendments. Most of them that was proposed were minor language changes. Some would, some are do change some of the process. But however, we are also waiting for comments from OMAFRA, and we're also waiting for comments. I think it's just OMAFRA, or there was another agency we're waiting comments on. So I think that to satisfy the public, to satisfy myself, and I hope other members of council, we need to hear from the public again. And although everybody wants to get this done and over with, this is too important a document to rush through. And I understand the concerns about the secondary plan, and in hindsight, we probably should have waited to start a secondary plan until after the official plan was passed. But that's here nor there now. Hindsight is 2020. But that's the reason for my motion.
Thank you. Seconder, did you have comment? No? Okay. Other comments? I'll go with Councillor Buderick and then Councillor Townend.
I'm going to support this because my whole idea behind this, when I seconded the original time when Councillor Porter put this forward, was to get some public input and also to educate the public. We are getting better at informing the constituents of what's going on and what we are doing. But if you read some of the replies in this report, there are still some people that don't quite understand exactly what the OP can do for them. So I'm in favor of getting some public consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Townend.
Through you, Your Worship, I'd like clarity on what exactly we are putting out to the public for consultation. So am I to understand correctly that Councillor Porter wants a public consultation conducted again, but with the official plan as it was amended on December 15th? So
with the 35 amendments. That's correct, Councillor Porter?
Amendments.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay. I won't be supporting the motion. I think the report makes very clear this evening that there are significant problems with several of those amendments that a public consultation isn't going to change. I mean, at some point we have to defer to the educated experts that we hire to advise us on these matters. And I'm perfectly satisfied with what they've written for all the reasons that have been outlined. And I just consider that this will just further delay this process. And I won't be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Other members of council? Deputy, go ahead.
Thank you. Excuse me, I won't be supporting it either as it stands. I agree with Councillor Townsend, and we've had extensive public engagement already. It's been pretty impressive, the public engagement that we have had. And so I'm not going to be supporting it as it stands. I believe that we have what we need. And I agree with Councillor Townsend that staff have done a great job, and I lean heavily on their expertise in an area that I am not an expert in.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Parks, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm not sure if this is the right time to ask this. With the motion that Councillor Porter has put forward, if we don't move forward with that, if that motion doesn't get approved tonight, then where do we stand with this process? Do we go with the suggestions or the amendments that staff are making? Like, I'm trying to get clarity on what would happen.
I believe if this motion carries, then this would cause staff to redraft, publicize the new draft of the OP, and put that forward for public meeting. If this motion doesn't carry, then I would be looking for another motion as to how to move forward. Director Merritt.
I just also, thank you, Your Worship. I also wanted to clarify that it's not just public meeting. If we are making the changes as proposed on December 15th, we have to recirculate to all of the agencies, because some of the wording are actually undoing, as I think Mr. Winicky said, it's undoing the approvals that they've given us. For example, OMAFRA had made some comments with some of the policies. So it's not just public consultation, it's also recirculation through all the agencies.
And Ms. Merritt, or either of the other two staff here, would you be able to give an estimate as to how long it will take to do the redraft, do the full circulation, get the comments back, set up public meeting, statutory public meeting, and like how long do you expect that it would take to come back to council for, I'll call it final approval, if that process goes forward?
I would hazard to guess 4 or 5 months at least.
Okay, thank you. And anyone else? And I'll go back to the mover for final comment.
Yes, and I know it might take a little bit more time, but I think it's worthy of more time. As I said earlier, this is a very important document. And it's not just the amendments that we're not talking about the amendments that the staff are not supporting. Those are all open to change based on public input and public feedback and additional consideration to the comments made by staff. But it's also staff are supporting some of the amendments, and I think the public should be aware of what even those amendments are prior to implementing the supported ones, as well as looking at the unsupported ones. So to me, when we're making changes, notably staff are supporting, I don't know, 10 or 12 different amendments, I think the public needs to know that and needs to have opportunity to comment on that. And that's why I think it needs to go through the process, as well as being discombobulated and disjointed, and that this process, there's people out there that thought this was done and over with last year in 2019 and didn't realize it was resurfacing, that didn't realize it hadn't been finalized, and didn't have opportunity to comment last year and would have liked to have commented this year. So I think given the circumstances, it's really important that we do give our public an additional kick at the can, so to speak.
Thank you. That was final comment. With that, I will call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. All opposed? And motion is carried. Okay. With that, is there any other motions with regard to this? Seeing none, it's the end of the meeting. Oh, Councillor Tannen?
Point of order.
Yes?
I didn't see the deputy mayor vote at all on this question. His screen is frozen, and I wanted to request a recorded vote on this issue.
I did see the deputy mayor vote, but as far as the recorded vote, to the clerk, can we ask for a recorded vote after the fact? Then I'll ask you to proceed with a recorded vote.
Yes, you can, Your Worship. Let me just get that on here. So we will start with Councillor Townend.
Not in favor.
Councillor Buderick.
We need to hear it, Councillor Buderick.
My apologies, yes.
Councillor Gordon.
In favor.
Councillor Parks.
In favor?
Councillor Porter.
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Hagedorn.
We couldn't hear that, Jim.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. And Mayor Brzee.
Opposed.
Motion was carried.
Thank you. And again, if there's anything else for the good of the committee, then I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Deputy, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gordon, thank you. Right. And all those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Opposed to adjournment? And motion is carried. And we are adjourned, folks. Thank you.